Okay, well, hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll find out more about grants and funding opportunities from our colleagues at TBAT. Before I hand over to our presenter, I just wanted to remind everyone that today's webinar will be recorded and made available at a later point. The webinar will include about a 45-minute presentation followed by a Q&A session at the end. Please use the chat function in Zoom to submit all of your questions, and we'll make sure
webinar thing with Silverstone Innovation
to make sure that we apologies for that. Please use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll make sure we'll answer as many of those as possible at the end. Before I hand over, I also wanted to thank Hexagon, who are sponsoring today's webinar. They're a global leader in digital reality solutions that make manufacturing smarter. And to find out more about what they do, please visit their website, hexagonmi.com. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Esther, who will be leading today's webinar. Over to you, Esther.
Oh, thanks, Lena. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Funding Your Innovation webinar. So today I'm joined with quite a few of my colleagues. So we've got Jo Rodsky with us. She's from our partnership and events. We've also, you're very lucky, you've got two of our expert bid writers today. So we've got Bethan and Lydia on the call, who will be talking through a little bit more around the application a bit later in the webinar, but they'll also be there to answer your calls at the, answer any questions that you've got at the end. So if you think of any good questions, start putting them in the chat. They can start having a read through so that they can answer them when we're ready at the end. So Jo, if I could have the next slide, please. So TBAT have been around now for around about 21 years. And we've always been here to help innovative companies like yourselves access a range of funding and incentives that are available. So, we're going to talk about grant funding, but I also just wanted to run through the other services that we can help with at TBAT. So we can help with, if you're doing innovative R&D, we've got a team of expert R&D tax accountants who are there to help from the very early stages of, can you claim R&D, right the way through to maybe you've heard about some changes that are coming up, you're not sure how they're going to affect your company, or maybe you've had some inquiries come through, that they'll always be more than happy to help you and talk you through that. And there's lots of other incentives that people don't always know about, things like video games, tax relief, capital allowance. If you're creating some IP, there's patent box. But more recently, we've been asked lots and lots of questions around SEIS and EIS and the support packages available. So maybe you need some help with a financial forecast or a business plan, or you want someone to help with all the actual paperwork for the advanced assurance. We've got a team of experts who are always on hand to just to talk you through that. But as I said, today we're really here to talk about grant funding. Thanks, Jo. And you're going to hear lots of different types of funding that's available out there, whether it's coming from local, through the LEPs or through different growth hubs. But what we can really help with at TBAT and where we have real value is through the research and development funding. And this is coming through UK government via Innovate UK, some other funding bodies which we're going to talk about. Oh, Jo's computer's going a bit crazy on me. But it's there. It's all around how we're going to reduce the risk of innovation and make sure that UK companies can continue to afford, to innovate new products, processes and services. Next slide now, Jo. Thanks. So why would we bother with grant funding? Might seem like a really crazy question, because you think, oh, well, I've heard some people say to me in the past that, I spent 6 weeks writing an application and it wasn't successful. Or, I've spent all my time doing this and they didn't even mark it. They send it back without, giving me any feedback, or it just takes a lot of time and, you won't be successful because of a particular area that you're working in. The truth is that, everybody has a really good chance of receiving grant funding, but it's all about making sure you put the right amount of effort into your application. So first of all, making sure that you fit the scope and the criteria, because some of those companies who say, well, we applied and we didn't get any feedback, it's because they didn't fit the scope of that in the first place. We had one recently where somebody was applying into a biomedical catalyst for, human projects, and it was for, a veterinary project they were working on. So it's about making sure that your application is going to fit the scope, the criteria, that you've got a really good team there that you're going to be able to carry out the project. So as long as you can tell that story and you put the time into that application, you've got a great chance of receiving free money. It's also a brilliant time to go out and speak to investors. So we hear all the time from investors that they're actively looking at companies that have received grant funding, because a lot of the due diligence that they would have had to have done has already been done. It's been rubber stamped by the government. They know that you've got, you know, a project that you can work on that nobody else is doing. You know, you've got your IP strategy sorted. You've got a really good team behind you. You know how you're going to take this to market. So ultimately for them, it's a good time to invest. And maybe you're thinking about, you know, looking at projects where they're collaborative R&D grants that you might need to have a consortium together. So it's a good time to start reaching out, making conversations really early on. You don't have to think, right, there's a grant launching next month, let's have that conversation now. Go away, have a chat to the KTN. They can help make some connections, or come and have a chat with us at TBAT. We might have people that, you know, we can make those connections for, but it's a really good time if you're looking at grant funding to go away and start those, you know, collaborative conversations with people. But ultimately with grant funding, it's going to reduce the risk of putting your own cash in. So it's not ultimately free cash, as Lydia will always tell you. There is an element of match funding, but it is going to give you up to 70% of your project costs back that you're not going to have to worry about them risking your own cash into. Now the next one, please, Joe. So where can you go to get grant funding? There's lots of different funding bodies out there, and they all going to have like a particular theme, but there's also competitions that are completely open. So when we start looking at the grant funding landscape, you'll see that competitions are only open for a really short space of time. And it's really important to know what's coming up so that you can apply for a grant at the right time. Unfortunately, most people find out about grants way too late. And it's the bane of Beth and I's life when we have to say to people, we're really sorry, we can't help you because the deadline's in 3 days' time. It's just not physically possible for us to write grants in that time. We like to be able to say to people, you know, we know, we've had a conversation, we know exactly what you're looking for. We'll monitor all these funding bodies. And when we see a grant that pops up that's going to be suitable for you, we can come and let you know. So we can have early conversations, and it gives us a good 6 weeks window at least to write an application, which means that, you know, you're not like at the last minute trying to find a partner to bring them on board, or we're quickly trying to find finances. At TBAT, we offer, you know, our watch service, where if we've had an early conversation with you, we'll let you know something's coming up, so you don't have to sit there and wait for it. We can also make sure that we keep you updated with newsletters, so you know exactly what's coming out of all these different competitions. So can I have the next slide, please, Joe? So this is very much the tip of an iceberg. So don't look at this and think none of these competitions are suitable for me, because this is just a real small selection of what's out there. The Innovation Funding Service currently has 45 different competitions, and that changes on a daily basis. But just to give you some ideas of what's out there, we've got, you know, open calls for innovation, things like the Smart Grant. Now, this is a rolling competition. As one opens, then so it closes, and there's another one that comes up. Normally, they run around 3 times a year. The current one has just been extended. The deadline was April. For those who didn't know, it's now been pushed out to June. But the great thing about the Smart Grant is a catch-all for anyone that doesn't fit into a particular themed grant right now. And it can fund anything from 100K up to 2 million, depending on whether you're going in as a single entity, or, you know, maybe you've got a consortium. It allows you to have a bigger project, and the projects can run from 6 to 36 months. So it really is a good competition for anybody that's thinking about grant funding. But what we also say is, if you are doing something that's quite niche and you fit into one of the other competitions that's themed, then the competition is going to be slightly less, because you're only applying against other people doing something similar to yourself. And just to give you a little overview right now, there's funding available within, you know, resource efficiencies for materials and manufacturing. So this one really is there. So if you're looking for manufacturing organizations looking to reduce carbon, and you're looking at, you know, smart design, supply chain, looking at, you know, the actual materials that you're using, or even the way you're producing things, there's anything from 100K up to £1 million in funding. So big competitions, things like the energy catalyst that's running right now. Again, that's around, you know, low carbon, affordable, reliable energy projects, or clean energy access for people within, you know, sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and Indo-Pacific regions. They're running 3 competitions. That's a pot of £10 million. And it's going to fund projects anything from like 50K up to £5 million. There's funding that's coming out through the bilateral competitions. So right now there's a German one open, but there's also a Singapore, Switzerland, a South Korea one. And I know in the past there's been Canada. So if you are working with SMEs that are kind of dotted around the country and the world, it's well worth having a look at those because they are becoming more and more popular. And right the way through to competitions that, we know that launching in the next couple of days through the Automotive Transformation Fund and APC, there's funding available around scale-up manufacturing processes. There's going to be 2 competitions. They've got a feasibility study that's anything from 100k to 350k, and then their larger competition that will go up to £2 million. So as you can imagine, the grant funding landscape is always changing. There's lots of funds available, but it's about finding the right grant at the right time for you. So if you're looking at this now thinking, I'd love to know more, do book a one-to-one with us and we can look at how we can help you going forward, and you can start planning. So if you're thinking about grant funding in 6 months' time, now's when you really want to start looking around to see, well, what happened last year? Is it likely to happen again? So you can start to plan for those grants. Next slide, please, Joe. So if you are thinking, okay, I found a competition, I think it fits, there's some questions that you really need to start asking yourself around your project. So, what's the motivation for your project? Is there a particular challenge that's going to be solved by your technology? Did you identify that there's a gap in the market, or a particular opportunity that you think, oh, my innovation is going to fit? So therefore, you've got a clear route to commercialize. These are the kind of questions you really need to have before you start writing that application. So do you need partners on board? We see this time and time again where somebody comes along, they found a competition, it's a perfect fit. They've ticked all those boxes, they fit the scope, the criteria, they've got an idea of partners they'd like to work with, but they can't pin them down. And, they're like 2 weeks before a deadline, they're still waiting on that final partner to sign up, and they pull out, and ultimately the whole project collapses. So make sure you've got your partners on board and that they are willing to kind of sign up to the T's and C's, and you've got the IP sorted beforehand. It just makes it a lot easier when you come to write your grant. And look at your project costs. We get asked this all the time, how much should I apply for? And it's not down to, Bethan and Lydia to say, right, I think this is the sweet spot, you should just apply for this because everybody gets funded when they apply for this amount of money. It's about looking at your project, understanding what are your project costs, how much money do you need, and ultimately remembering that, this money is coming through, it's public money. You've got to be able to say, we can offer really good return on investment. So it's about looking at what you need for your particular project, making sure that you're going to be able to carry out the project on time to budget without completely looking at, under egging it because you think if we only apply for £200,000, we're bound to get it. They will look at it and think it's not enough. You won't be able to carry it out to that particular time. So it's all about your costs and not looking at what's the average that I should apply for. And the next slide, please, Joe. So you've looked at those and you're thinking to yourself, okay, now we're ready. We want to apply. The one thing we would always recommend is that you go along to the briefing event, and you can find this by going to the Innovation Funding Service portal. And under dates, you'll find that there's always going to be a competition briefing event. And if you have missed it, you can always watch it because they record it. So it's just going to make sure that you understand all the competition criteria. And at that point, you've got your partners on board. You've got your costs agreed. Now we're at the point where you think, right, how are we going to move into writing our application? Next slide, please, Joe. So this is where I'm going to pass over to Lydia, who's going to talk you through the actual application process from, how do you register on the portal? How do you add those partners? And then ultimately, she's going to talk you through writing an application. Lydia, I'm going to pass over to you.
Thanks, Esther. So yeah, as Esther said earlier, I'm a grant consultant at TBAT, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the finer points of what you should expect if you are going to apply. So the first step is to register on the Innovate Funding Services portal. It's super easy. You just log on, click the register button and fill out your email address and password. And then you can begin to add partners. So this is adding your email addresses of either your lead partner and or any additional partners that will be carrying out the project with you. And then you'll begin to fill out the application based upon a draft that we create for you that's then approved. So can we have the next slide, please? So as Esther said previously, and you've seen that nice graph covering lots of different options of grants, there are quite a few different grants out there. The biggest grant body that we usually work with is Innovate UK. So whilst it is the same grant body, they do offer lots of different competitions, and you'll find the format, number of questions and content covered is always slightly different. However, they do focus on a couple of main key points which are outlined below. So it's applicant location, you always need to include this, a discussion of your idea and innovation, a justification for funding, because as Esther has said, it is public funding, so we really need to explain why you deserve to get this funding from the public. A discussion of the market, just to show that you have really good commercial potential. Impacts and benefits, so these are impacts and benefits on the UK as a whole, not just on your business. Delivering your project, so the timeline, the costs, and the people in your team who are going to help carry out the tasks associated with the end goal. How your project represents value for money, and how the taxpayers' money will be spent. And finally, that all-important finances section that is really just a breakdown of the project costs. So the most important one to touch on here, because it's not mentioned in later slides, is applicant location. So Esther's already discussed the fact that when you're going into an application process, what you really want to have already done is identified your partners and any other subcontractors or advisors that you're working with, because you'll need to include the name of each of these entities and their location, so their registered address and company number. So it's really, really important that you don't come into an application just saying, we want to use a subcontractor for this specific type of work, and then leave it as to be confirmed, because that won't fly with the assessors. So you need to be really, really sure of what your project outputs are going to be and who is going to contribute to them along the project timeline. Next slide, please. So one of the first major themes that all the applications cover is your idea and innovation. Sometimes this is combined with the need or challenge, which obviously discusses the problem that you're addressing. So first of all, we need to begin by positing that problem, suggesting why it's such a problem, particularly within the UK, because that's the focus of these applications. You then need to discuss what it is that you are building and what you've done so far to build towards that end product. So have you done any research? Have you conducted any feasibility studies? Perhaps you already have a prototype. We also want to discuss who's been involved in that development and how you've got it to where it is currently. We also want to discuss the end output of the project. So what is your product going to look like? What will it do? With the idea and innovation section, you can also get an appendice. It's often 2 pages, and it's a really great idea to include some imagery in there to show the assessors what you currently have and what you're looking to have by the end of this project work. One of the most important sections of discussing your idea and innovation is making sure that the unique selling points really stand out from competitors. It's not enough to sort of glaze over your competition and pretend that you're the only one doing that unique and novel thing. You need to describe in detail all of the direct and indirect competitors you're coming up against and why your solution is better than theirs. And it shouldn't just be down to it should be focusing on those technical aspects of your solution and why they're more novel than the competitors out there. Next slide, please. So the next section that Esther's sort of already touched on is justification for funding. And this is actually linked with another question that comes up in most applications called value for money. So it's all about why your specific project is suitable for grant funding specifically. So this is in comparison to getting something like private investment to push along the development of your product. So you're going to need to talk about the journey you've already taken to ensure you're ready for grant funding. So have you received any prior private investment? Have you applied for successfully or unsuccessfully any previous grants? Why do you fit the bill of this grant specifically? And has your team undertaken any training, support or mentoring in order to prepare yourself as a business for taking on the challenge and responsibility of carrying through the grant work if you were to receive the funding? You also will want to touch on what would happen to your project if you weren't to receive this funding. The assessors want to see that you really believe in this idea and that you would carry on regardless because the product is going to be commercially important to the UK. But they want to understand why public funding is so essential. So normally it's something like, public funding would expedite the timeline or enable collaboration with entities that otherwise you wouldn't be able to collaborate with in order to create such a novel product. Next slide, please. So obviously one of the major parts of the application is not just what you're building and how you're building it, but who you're going to sell it to. So the potential market is quite a broad scope question. So what we want to discuss here is who you're targeting and how you're going to target them. And we do this in a couple of ways. So we do want to take that sort of top-down approach using resources like Statista to come up with market sizes and values to give a broad scope approach and understanding to the assessors of how much money there is that you could possibly make out of this innovation. On the other side, we also want to use a bottom-up approach. So looking at how many customers you reasonably think you can access in your total addressable market and serviceable addressable market, and multiplying that by the cost of your product in order to gain the value of those markets. We'll also need to look at some segmentation, which niches of the market are you specifically going to target and why? And do you have any evidence of willingness to pay from the customers that you're going to target within those market segments? As I said before, most of the project applications come with these appendices, and something that's really great to have, if you have it to hand or if you can get it, are letters of support for intent from customers or users that suggest that you have surveyed the market and established a willingness to pay from your customers. Other important sections to cover in the market are your FTO, so that's your freedom to operate, and whether or not you've done any investigations with legal entities into whether you can protect via patents, know-how, or any other type of protection the outputs of your project, because obviously that's going to be very, very important when you come to exploit your project outputs. Last but not least, we want to look at any barriers to entry. As we mentioned before, the assessors take a very realistic view to these applications. So as with the competitors, they don't want you to ignore the barriers to entry to this market. They want you to acknowledge them and then mitigate them. So it's really important to understand who is in your market and how they present a challenge in terms of you targeting the entirety of your commercial opportunity. Next slide, please. So impacts and benefits is quite a wide scope question as well. And here we really want to be talking about the impacts and benefits of your product on the wider UK. So we will talk a little bit about the return on investment for your business and how much money you're going to make for your business specifically. But we also want to look at the economic, social and environmental impacts on the UK. So these can be things like creating new educational or job opportunities, contributing to any kind of government goals, such as those focused around the environment or perhaps medicine. And really ensuring the creation and safeguarding of jobs specifically within regional areas. So that's a really big focus, particularly in the upcoming years of Innovate UK applications, is that they want the benefits of these projects to be well distributed throughout the UK. So we do not want to be just focusing on job creation in London or the South. We want to be looking all around the UK and making sure that the economic and social impacts are widespread. One of the most important sections of impacts and benefits, funnily enough, is discussing negative impacts. Similarly, as with the competitors, you must acknowledge any negative impacts your project might have. If you're a software project and you're using a lot of sort of AI or ML type technology, this will often be something like energy usage for the data processing. If you're creating a physical product and you're in manufacturing, this will obviously be the environmental impact of, using up finite resources. It's super important to acknowledge that you understand the scope of the impacts of your project and that you have well laid out plans on how to mitigate against these. Next slide, please. So delivering your project kind of does what it says on the tin. So we want to be thinking here about timelines. How long is your project going to take? What are the tasks within your project? What are the milestones and deliverables that you're leading up to? And how much is each section of your project going to cost? We break all your your projects down into work packages that describe a specific section of work that delivers towards the overall output and goal. You also want to discuss who is going to be doing these tasks and why are they qualified to do them. So often we'll need to include biographies of each sort of essential member of your team, any partner teams, as well as any subcontractors or advisors that you're going to be using or paying during the project. Each entity has to have the right skills and experience, and we really need to validate and evidence that through inclusion of things like academic qualifications, quantified work experience, and also discuss their specific role on this project, ideally with responsibilities and relations to specific work package outputs. Next slide, please. So value for money, I mentioned earlier, and it really links back to justification for funding and wider benefits. So because the money that you'll be receiving is coming from taxpayers, it's super important to explain how each part of your project and each place that you're going to use that money represents good value for money. An easy example of this is we wouldn't want you to have a subcontractor that is performing the exact same role as somebody who's in-house, because obviously that shows overlap and you're not using the money efficiently. The value for money section will show quite an in-depth breakdown of the costs aligned with all of the tasks or work packages, just to show how each pound is being used to push out this end deliverable that we're all looking for. You'll also need to discuss the project partner's contribution and how each entity is going to fund their match funding, which is something that Esther touched upon earlier. Obviously, you don't get 100% of total project costs funded, so you really need to be super clear about the fact that you have that 30%. Usually for small businesses, it's higher if you are a medium or large business, but you need to be really clear about the fact that you understand that you are required to put up that money and where it's going to come from. Last but not least, you need to talk about what happens after the project. What are you going to do after the project to ensure that your device or software is going to be commercially successful? Some of you will be taking quite a few developmental step changes, but might not come out of this project with a commercializable product. So we need to really give the assessors an understanding of what you are going to do next to ensure that you can bring this product to market and that's going to be really commercially successful. So are you going to do more R&D? Are you going to do a ramp up of commercialization, perhaps on board a marketing team, an advertising team? And how are you going to pay for this? Is this going to be via different partnerships? Are you going to continue to work in the consortium that you worked on within the project? And how are you going to finance this? Is this going to be via private finance options such as VCs or angels? Who are they and how does your connection with them work? So it's really important to evidence that the end of the project is not the end of your business or the end goal, that you do have a good, strong business plan in place in order to ramp up production and sell into your selected market. Next slide, please. And I think that's me done. I'll pass back to Esther now.
Oh, thanks, Lydia. That was brilliant. Even I've learned something from that, so it was great. And just touching on what you were saying, value for money and what can be included in costs. As you can see, there's a huge amount of project costs that can be included. So your labour, subcontractor, your overheads, materials, travel, and capital depreciation, if there are any large pieces of machinery or equipment that you're buying for that particular project. And Lydia and Beth and I are always happy to have a chat about your particular project, so we can start to help you, look at what could be included going forward. Next slide, please, Joe. So Lydia touched on match funding, and what does that mean for your company? So quite often people will come along and say, well, actually, I haven't got that 30%, so can I offer my time in kind? Unfortunately, as Lydia mentioned, you have to be able to evidence that you will have your 30% available when you start your project. And it's kind of key to understand that, grant funding is great. If you've got the time to be able to plan and you know that you're going to have the match funding element available, you're going to be able to carry out your project on time, because ultimately you're not going to see that first payment from Innovate UK until month 4. So if you've got your match element in the bank, that's what's going to be able to pay for your work for the first 3 months. You can invoice at the end of month 3 and you'll be paid 30 days later. And that's going to happen throughout the duration of your project. It's always going to be paid retrospectively. So if you are looking at a 500k project, you're going to need to have about 110k in the bank in order to carry out that project. So it's just really key to be thinking about that early on. If you are going out to find different types of funding, it just gives you a good idea of where you need to be. If I can have the next slide, please, Joe. So if you are successful with grant funding, it doesn't really stop there. It's not a case that you're going to be given that cash in one lump sum. You are going to have to be, liaising with a monitoring officer going forward. So along the way, there's lots of steps that need to be carried out, and you will need to be ticking off, what work's been carried out and invoicing. It can be time consuming. And normally we would say you're going to need to allocate at least 3 days a quarter of your time to be able to do this. At TBAT, we can help you with the grant claims management from the very setting up of the project right the way through to, if you've got a 36-month project, we can help. And the really good thing about this is that you can include 70% of the cost of somebody to manage your claim externally. They can be written into the cost of your grant. That can either be when you submit it, or if you've been successful now and you're thinking about, actually, I might need some help, you can come and have a chat with us, and we can have a little look at how we can help, and we can resubmit a change form and include the costs of that into your grant. So we've got a whole team that are quite happy to sit down and have a chat with you. Maybe you're halfway through a grant and you still need some help. We can help you with that process. So it's just another additional service that we can help with, especially if you're a small team and you don't have the time to dedicate towards that. We can help with it. Next slide, please, Joe. So I'm sure that Bethan and Lydia might chip in here about top tips. But the real key ones that we come across are really simple. Answer all the questions in bullet points. It's, as Lydia's just gone through, there are a lot of questions and there's lots of information to get in there. If you don't answer all the questions, you're not going to be successful. Don't use acronyms and technical jargon that people won't understand. So if you're applying into an open call like the SMART grant, you're going to have competent professionals that are reviewing it, but they might not be industry experts in your particular field. And if you're using technical jargon that they just don't understand, the chances are they're not going to understand the whole project. And again, you're going to get marked down for that. So make sure that you keep it nice and simple so that they do understand it. You really simple ones like using all the formatting options, making it clear and easy to read makes a massive difference. If you've got reviewers that are looking at hundreds of competitions a year, just make it easy for them to use and use the formatting options. But the biggest one that we always say is leaving plenty of time for writing and reviewing. We like to leave 6 weeks at TBAT for us to write an application. And that doesn't mean that Bethan and Lydia are scribbling away continuously for 6 weeks, but it's about having that time to step back and review and make sure that you are including everything that's needed into it. And ultimately review it. If you're not going to come to TBAT for us to help you with it, there are lots of free services. You can go and have a chat to Innovate Edge. They'll review your application for you. Or if you've got a growth hub that you're working with, I'm sure that they'll have somebody that can just review it and make sure that there's nothing glaringly obvious missing from your application. And make sure that you leave plenty of time to upload it. I always laugh that we were working with a client about 8 months ago who decided that he wanted to be the one for his company had written a grant, spent 6 weeks doing it, and he wanted to be the person that uploaded it. So he said, I'll have a quick read through in the morning when it was due to be uploaded. And he got called away to go into a meeting, and he came back about an hour after the deadline and then realized that the 6 weeks worth of work that his company had put into was completely wasted because he forgot to upload it. So just give yourself plenty of time for writing, reviewing and uploading. And Bethan and Lydia, I don't know if you've got any tips that you want to add into that.
No, you covered everything from my side.
Cool. So I think we're going to move on if we've got any questions. Now.
Hello, everyone. Yes. Hi, Esther. Thank you very much. That's been a great presentation. We do have a couple of questions and I'll raise those with you in a second. But a lot of them are asking the same thing. So I just wanted to update everyone. All of the slides and the recording from today's webinar will be shared with people who've attended the webinar. So you will get a copy. The email that you'll receive will also include a link which you can use to book some time with Esther to then talk about your projects in more detail. So hopefully that gives you a bit of well, sets your minds at ease. But one of the questions that we had from one of our users was, can we have a brief introduction to TBAT? Who are they and what they do?
Okay, yeah. So as I mentioned in the beginning, so TBAT have been around now for around 21 years. We are a consultancy and we help people access funding. Now we've got a team of grant writers, which Lydia and Bethan are two of, where we can help from very early stage where you can come along, have a chat to us, and we can help you identify which is the right grant to go into. We can then offer a full grant writing service where Bethan and her team will literally run with you and submit your application on your behalf. Obviously, they'll need to take all the information that you guys have built on over, looking at your projects, but it really takes away a lot of the headaches, and they will be able to work with you to make sure that you submit a really strong, robust application. We have another service where maybe you've been unsuccessful in the past, or you've written a draft and you think it's almost there, but not quite, and you'd like them to offer a review and amend service. They can help with that. Or just coming to us when you've written your application thinking, I'd like someone to review this and make sure that there's no glaringly obvious mistakes. Then Lydia and Bethan can offer a review, which can be done over 1 or 2 days. We've also got, as I said earlier, teams of technical accountants, so we can help with R&D tax, right the way through to all the other incentives that are out there. We're based up in Castle Donington, is our head office, but we're kind of scattered throughout the country these days. So a lot of what we do is over Teams. So if you would like to have a one-to-one with us, we're more than happy to set up a call. We can have half an hour just to kind of discuss what your particular need is, and then we can point you in the right direction of one of our experts when we can move forward, whether it's in grant funding, R&D tax, or any of the other incentives that are out there.
Thank you very much, Esther. I think we had a couple of latecomers, so it was really useful for you to recap. We've got 2 questions around costs associated with this and how much TBAT are charging for their services, whether those are free of charge or whether there will be a charge.
Unfortunately, we don't do it for free because we like to get paid, but it really depends on the competition and the level of service that you're looking for. So each competition is going to have slightly different application, but what we can do is if you've got a particular competition you're interested in, you can come and have a chat. We always charge an upfront fee to write the application, and then a success fee if you're successful going forward. On the R&D tax side, it's done completely differently. That's actually a percentage of any tax that we can save you. But it's very much dependent on the competition, because some of them might take 6 weeks to write, some might take 3 months.
That's great. Thank you very much. We've got another question from Robert Sansby. With the corporation tax increase, how would you advise businesses regarding the patent box scheme? Basic calculations would suggest patenting a product generating £10,000 a year profit would pay for itself in tax reductions within 3 years. So
I'm going to be honest and say that we've got a team that are dedicated to patent box, so we're more than happy to set up a call and introduce him to Sam, and then he can have a bit more of an in-depth conversation about patent box.
That's great. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions that people would like to submit at the time? I think we'll leave it to that. Over to you, Esther. I know that you wanted to tell us a little bit more about one of your challenges. So,
yeah, thank you. So last year we started our innovation challenge because we found that there's lots of companies out there that might not quite be ready for grant funding yet, and need a little bit of help early on. And it could be around, you're not quite sure which way to go in terms of finance. If you're looking at grant funding but didn't quite have the match funding services, you might be thinking, okay, how else can I access money? Maybe you're thinking about, what kind of people should I recruit at what stage, or you're actually looking at product development, your IP protection, or commercialization. So we thought, actually, how can we help these smaller companies and get them on the right track so that they will be eligible for grant funding at some point? That's where the Innovation Challenge came in last year. It was really successful. Everybody loved it. So this year, Joe has been working her socks off to bring us our second Innovation Challenge. We've currently got 4 workshops that are running. The first one has already happened, but you're more than welcome to have the recording. But we've got 3 more that are still to book up. You can book via Eventbrite, so you can come along to any of these. Once you've been on one of our webinars, you're then eligible to apply into our Innovation Challenge. Now, that opened think, Joe, it actually just opened recently, didn't it? 2 days, I think it was about 2 days ago. So to apply, it's really simple. You need a business plan and there's a one-page application that once we've got all the applications in by the 31st of July, we will then go through those business plans, narrow it down to the top 20. And then from then, we will narrow it down to our 10 finalists that get to come along to our Innovation Day. The great thing about the Innovation Day, it's going to give you the opportunity to pitch your idea in a room full of industry experts and investors. And people are going to be really good for networking and also just to give you some feedback on your pitching, because it's something that's really difficult to do. And actually knowing how to deal with that, they'll give you a little bit of feedback, which is really good. The brilliant thing is we don't know on the day who are the winners. So from those top 10 finalists, once you've put your pitch in, they'll go away and they'll pick 3 winners on the day. So you'll find out who's going to win our 5K prize, but also a support package from all the partners on board, as well as the place 2 and 3, they will also win support packages. And it may be that you need some help with product development. So you get 5 days support with a product development company, or you want 5 days support from a solicitor, an accountant, you need some help with your R&D tax. They will pick a package that is specific for what you're doing, and it is going to offer you the most value for money. So even if you don't want to enter the challenge, do come along to the webinars because they're really informative. That, you know, if you want to read it, if you want to watch the recording of the finance one, I know we had Lewis Stringer from British Business Bank was giving some really good insights. We had a speaker from Shakespeare Martineau, plus lots of other ways that you could fund your business. So they're really helpful. They're all about, you know, how do we get you from where you are now to the next stage with some really insightful kind of information and lots of experts that will be there. So hopefully, Joe, I've done that justice for you as you're running it. And you can find the details for that on the TBAT website, but I think also we're going to send this link out afterwards so you can go away and have a little look. And have we got before, I think we've still got, you know, 10 minutes or so. So if anyone's got any questions about any grant funding while we've got Bethan and Lydia, feel free to pop any last minute questions in.
Thank you, Esther. We do have 2 questions for you. Where can people find out more about all of the current competitions? Would that be on the website that's included in your slides?
Yeah, you can come along to TBAT's website. We've got a funding finder. It makes it really simple. Everything's kind of linked by sector. Or you can go to UKRI, where they list all the competitions, but also the Innovation Funding Service portal. That's where you can actually go in and find the application, the scope, the criteria.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We also have a question asking whether people can get funding for products aimed at aerospace or defense.
Yeah, Bethan, would you like to take that one?
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. So a lot of aerospace funding is run through an organisation called the ATI, and a lot of defence funding comes through DASA. Again, they're all on our website in the funding finder.
There's actually, yeah, there's a fund available at the moment for aerospace, and that's through NATEP. I think it was on our a bit earlier. Do have a look on our website. So that one is the aim within aerospace technologies to enhance capabilities and to win new business. And that funding is anything from 100k up to 300k. So there is funding right now, but also, as Bethan said, DASA, they have an open call for innovation. And I was recently at an event with them, and they've got a whole kind of runway of funding that's due to come up over the next 12 months. So have a little look at the actual funding body websites as well. You'll find out lots more information, or you can sign up to our TBAT newsletter, and we'll send you out information as competitions are launching.
That's great, Esther. Thank you very much. I think we'll allow, we've got another question that's just come in. Where is the create account link on the IFS website? It directs to a list of competitions which does not appear to have a create an account link. It's a bit of a technical one, but if you can advise, that would be great.
I'll leave that one to Lydia or Bethan, as they are always on this site. Don't all jump at once, though. I think they're now looking to see where it is exactly.
So if you once you click into a competition, there should be a button to say, you know, start new application, and it's through that process.
Yeah, it's actually, I've just clicked on one. So if you were to say the Smart Grant, if you click on that, you go into it and it's got a big green button that says start new application, and that will take you into it. Oh yeah, they found it.
That's great. I think that's exhausted all of our questions for today. So I think with that, we will say thank you. It's been a very insightful presentation. I'm sure that our attendees have gained a lot, and there's some really useful insights that they're taking away. I also wanted to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. Before you log off, please take a moment to complete our poll, as your feedback is always very important to us. So that will be on your screens within the next minute or so. And of course, please visit our website if you want to find out more and register for any of our other events coming up. But thank you very much to everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. We look forward to meeting you on one-to-one soon.